Right, well, we'll start now, and
Okay.
I, I, I'm going to, first of all, say that the interview with Roman Frigg is beginning now. And first of all, I'd like to say something about your work on models and representation. Could you say something about that?
Yes. Well, I has some a lot to do also with my history. So I came to LSE, and then modeling was a hot topic, and I found that really exciting. But I was then always interested in, well, how do models do what they do? And at least part of what they do is represent something else. If you have, say, a model of the hydrogen atom, that model would represent the hydrogen atom. And so I started thinking about, well, what does that mean? What representation relation is there between a model and its target system? And that really brought me to think about models and representation, and that has sort of stayed with me ever since.
Well, yes, and could you say something about the problems that you come up on about that? Uh, could you explain a little more what's meant by a model and so forth?
Yeah, well, there are several problems. I mean, I like to separate them into two problems, but two families of problems. But that's an analytical separation, not a substantive one, in the sense that one always has to deal with these at the same time. But two problems are the problems of ontology. So one has to ask oneself, well, what is the thing that we call a model? If you look at representations of other kinds, for instance, a painting, that answer seems to be sort of clear, at least at the surface level. We can say, well, the painting is a canvas, and that's a physical object. In the case of scientific models, that's often not the case. To use Ian Hacking's lovely phrase, many models are things that you hold in your head rather than in your hands. So there is the question of what these things actually are that we call models. And then the next problem is, of course, the problem of representation. Once one has an entity, just like once one has a canvas, it's not at all clear how that entity stands for something else. Now, a time-honored view is that this happens either due to similarity or due to isomorphism, so there being a relation of a substantive kind between the model and the target. But if one digs a bit deeper and one discovers certain problems there, then one is that both isomorphism and similarity are symmetrical relationships, but representation isn't. So if a model represents hydrogen, hydrogen doesn't represent the model, but if the model is similar to hydrogen, hydrogen is similar to the model. With the structuralist approach that sees models as being structures and representing via structural isomorphism, one has similar issues, and on top of that, one has the problem to find a target structure, because saying that a model conceptualized as a mathematical structure is isomorphic to a target system, which is part of the world, is prima facie a category mistake, because isomorphism is a relation that only holds between two structures. So one has to find a target structure at the other end, and that turns out to be rather difficult, because, or so my argument goes, that there is no unique structure to be picked up out there. Depending on how one describes a target system, there are very different structures out there, and so one has to have an entire layer of non-structural description in place before one can say that a target system has a certain structure that we're interested in. how exactly that goes. These are some of the issues I have
Yes.
been wrestling with.
Well, that's very interesting. The other thing you worked on was statistical mechanics, and you had a long article in Ashgate describing the statistical mechanics, and I wondered if you could say something about the problems there, and also what your view is about the interventionist approach to non-equilibrium statistical mechanics, the way that Ritterboss and myself put forward, you know.
Yeah. Statistical mechanics, that is a interesting topic. I was always fascinated by statistical physics, and so I just wanted to understand it better, and just trying to understand it got me deeper and deeper into it. I mean, very broadly speaking, one of the main problems there is one of reductions, and one tries to understand the relation between micro descriptions of a system and macro description of a system. From a macro point of view, say a gas is more or less homogeneous objects that can be characterized by macroscopic variables like pressure, temperature, and volume. While from a micro point of view, it is a collection of little particles bouncing around rather quickly. And so the problem really is how to understand the relation between these levels, and how then to retrieve something like thermodynamic behavior, in particular the second law of thermodynamics, from micro behavior. And in that context, I have been particularly interested in how to understand the notion of equilibrium and the approach to equilibrium. How is it that systems approach equilibrium? There are various theories there, but my own view is that one should take this top-down rather than bottom-up. So equilibrium should be defined in macroscopic terms, and then use this as a supervenience relation to see what it means in micro terms, rather than the other way around. So I guess I'm going a bit against the grain there. And that's an approach that I try to develop with my colleague Charlotte Berndl at the moment. Now you asked about interventionism. I find that a very interesting approach, and I am broadly sympathetic to this. I'm not sure I have a very definitive view on what's the right and wrong approach in statistical mechanics in general, or interventionism in particular. I mean, one of the problems I see with it is that one would think that systems would approach equilibrium, at least some systems, even if there was no environment. And that is something that the interventionist approach has a hard time with. But then maybe that intuition is wrong. Maybe a gas somewhere in the interstellar space where it doesn't interact with absolutely anything would not approach equilibrium at all. So there is a countervening intuitions here, and I haven't resolved it for myself which one of those intuitions I should go for, but I think it is definitely a very interesting approach that deserves to be studied more.
Well, that's very interesting. Now, another thing you worked on is climate change, and the problem, one of the problems there is to think of people who deny climate change, and how you distinguish that from the people that say yes to it, and it is just a matter of what you, is it a different way of answering that, you know?
Oh yeah, climate change, that's a a difficult one. Yes, I mean, what I have been interested mostly, I come to climate denials in a second. What I have been interested in is the predictability of climate models. I mean, the GCMs, global climate models, are increasingly used to make predictions. I mean, ever more fine-grained predictions. So our government has a project, UKCP09, that produces relatively detailed forecasts of climate variables on a 25-kilometer grid over the UK. And so the question is, how good are these forecasts in the sense of how much money should we bet on them? And I've worked with a team of climate physicists to understand better how these models work and what they do, and we came to sort of a negative conclusion in the sense that we're not convinced that these are predictions that or projections, as we would say in that context, that are really trustworthy for future decision making. So one should try to understand the physical situation and broad trends rather than produce fine forecasts. However, this has nothing to do with denying climate change. The basic physics that's in it, that's basically the greenhouse effect, is very well understood. It is well studied, and one can reproduce the basic effects in laboratory situations. So radiochemistry is a relatively solid discipline. So, and climate change deniers typically focus on poking holes into the methods of some particular branch of climate physicists and the wrong use of thermometers or certain model inadequacies. But they're often making good points about the details there, but I don't think it follows from them that there are any rational reasons to deny the reality of climate change. The basic physics is very well understood. There is a clear argument that putting greenhouse gases in the atmosphere leads to a warming of the atmosphere. I see no point in denying that. The uncertainty is about what this actually means. What are the effects of climate change? So global warming is sometimes misunderstood as just things getting a little bit warmer, more or less to the same extent everywhere. And that's just a misconception. So the global mean temperature going up can change local weather patterns quite fundamentally. It could get colder in one place of the Earth and warmer, in other places of the Earth. And figuring out what these patterns of change will be, that's a really difficult question. There is great uncertainty about that, but that's not the same as saying that there is no change.
Well, then, the next thing, just you have some interest in science and art, and the book that I wrote with Debs, that also discussed that question of art and so forth. And could you say something about what your view of that is?
Yeah, the science and art question is a question that keeps troubling me, and I again have no particular position I want to sell on this. But my entry point to this was the parallel that seems to be there between scientific modeling and storytelling. So when one looks at scientific models in some more detail, often they come accompanied with the whole narrative. And this narrative is crucial in the functioning of the model. The narrative is about situations, systems, circumstances, but these are typically counterfactual in the sense that they're not real. We talk about frictionless planes, about the pendulum with a massless string, about the population that's isolated from the environment, etc. And so there seems to be a parallel here with storytelling in literature, where we at least sometimes consider people that don't exist, situations that don't exist. And so I try to understand the parallel there between fiction in a literary context, fiction in a scientific context, and then try to use the positive analogy between these first. I'm trying to come up with an ontology for scientific models and truth conditions for claims about models by building on work, in particular by Kendall Wall, on such claims in literary contexts. And that was basically my road into this. One can, of course, take different routes there. One can also take the model for granted and ask about representation and say, how does a picture represent something? When we see a oil painting of Paris, say, before being a painting of something else, the painting is a canvas covered with paint. So how do dots of a pigment on a canvas portray something beyond themselves? And one can ask the same question about the scientific model, and there is also an interesting parallel there. One can worry about metaphors and the use of metaphors. There are many aspects to this, but personally I have explored that fiction aspect, but that's no claim that this is the only interesting angle or the only angle at all.
Could you say something about the future of CBNSS? Do you see it continuing prospering, or how do you see the future of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's many things to be said. I think basically the center is a nice thing as it is, and we just keep it going. That is increasingly difficult because funding is ever harder to come by and ever more necessary, so we have to work hard on getting grants. But beyond that, well, I really think that the visitors program and the events program that we have are wonderful. So we have between 30 and 40 visitors visiting the center every year. They stay here between a week and a year, and they come from all over the world, and this really gives an influx of ideas and people into the place that is absolutely marvelous. It's about 100 events taking place, so seminars, talks, lectures. That should also keep going, so I think that is a part of the center that is good. What we have to do a bit more of is outreach, so that is a growing area. So we try to put on more public events and more events that are outreach in the sense that they're not directed only at professional philosophers. So that's an area where I see room for improvement, and we should do more. And in particular on the internet, there is growing space. So we should have a larger, clearer web presence with more podcasts, with videos, with general information, and we're actually just working on something like that. We're working on an information platform where we make not only our publications available, but also have write-ups of our research project for a general audience. We've invested quite heavily in video capture equipment that is just about starting to function, and we want to make videos available online, general resources, sort of basically create a space where someone of the general public who's interested in philosophy of science could turn to and find information. We hope that it's useful to schools. So that is something we think about a lot at the moment, and we work on quite hard.
Well, could you ask you finally, what philosophers of influenced you most in your own work?
Oh, I'm not sure whether there is one philosopher, but definitely empiricism has been the dominant strand of thought for me. So that's actually what brought me to the UK in the first instance. I was a philosophy student in Switzerland, and I had to read absolutely everything from Heidegger to Confucius. But what really resonated with me most was when we read Hume. So I thought this was an absolute revelation. And then I started reading more of the British empiricists, Locke, Bacon, Mill later, and then I'm not sure exactly fitting into that category, but definitely the later Bertrand Russell was a really towering figure in my intellectual developments, and this is an intellectual tradition I still feel very comfortable with, and it was very important to me. And then I came to the LSE for my PhD, and then the people I met there really left a deep mark in my thinking. First of all, of course, you, Michael. I've learned quantum mechanics, quantum field theory, and philosophy of physics generally from you, and that has been with me ever since. And there were Nancy, Margie Morrison, and the whole modelling group that worked on models, which is also a topic that has stayed with me since. So it's really fair to say that the intellectual life at the LSE had a profound influence on my thinking and on what I do.
Well, thank you very much indeed for all those comments. And in a moment I'm going to switch off, but the interview with Roman Frigg is ending here.